Welcome to the Soul Forge, a place of silent mystery, quiet contemplation, and outright mayhem. Join your host, Sean Vanderloo, as he guides you through the adventures of living. Together, we'll talk about life and love, sex and dating, joy and heartache, memories and loss, and so much more. Don't worry, it's not nearly as pretentious as it sounds. Get ready for life, the universe, and everything on the Soul Forge.
Hey folks, today's episode is sponsored by wearedapperties.com. Go to wearedapperties for all your tie needs and put in promo code RUSTED. Get free shipping. All right, let's do the show.
Lock the gate!
Hey, and welcome to episode 20 of the Soul Forge podcast. So glad you could make it. What are we talking about today? Well, today's all about pop culture. Why are we talking about pop culture? Well, I got some excitement today in the mail. Last week, I ordered some new business cards for the podcast. But not only did I order them for the Soul Forge podcast, I also ordered them for the Rusted Robot podcast.
The Rusted Robot Podcast. Think about it.
The Rusted Robot podcast has been going for nearly 4 years, and I've ordered business cards in the past, I think 3 separate sets, and I tweak them all the time. This time what I did was I ordered one set of business cards, but double-sided. Both podcasts are represented on one business card. So when I hand it over to somebody, no matter what side they look at, they're looking at a podcast that I'm part of. So on the front side, I've got the Soul Forge podcast advertisement. It says, The Soul Forge Podcast, a free podcast about life and living. Be a better human. www.soulforgepodcast.com. Download for free today. You can't put too much on these cards. They're pretty small. But I've got the logo for the cast, and it basically sums up what it's about. It's about life and living and how to be a better human. So if that is exciting and interesting, then people are going to listen to it. Now, if they flip it over, we've got the Rusted Robot Podcast, your weekly dose of geek-style pop culture news. therustedrobot.podbean.com. So that's what I've got for you guys today. I've posted up those pictures on the Soul Forge Facebook page. I did it on my Instagram. You can find that at Darth Vaderloo. That's what brought this on. I've been racking my brains all day trying to come up with some kind of cool topic for you guys. And I had a few different ideas. I was going to do forgiveness. I was going to do the effects of social media on culture. And I still might do those topics down the road. But today, I wanted to do something. Because it's episode 20, I figured, you know what, I've done a lot of deep dives into different things. Last week was collecting, and I also did episodes on gratitude and depression and loss, decision-making. I did my whole dating history. We did the road trip one, anger, fatherhood, apathy, other things like that. But what am I passionate about besides collecting? Well, pop culture. I'm really into the whole pop culture scene. Right now, there is so much pop culture out there, it's incredible. Okay, so what about pop culture? How does this relate to what the Soul Forge podcast is about? How can we put pop culture, popular culture, and entertainment on the forge? Does that even make sense? Of course it does. Pop culture has shaped my life. It's one of my main areas of interest in life. Naturally, we can put it into the flames, roasted over the coals, being very dramatic right now for some unknown reason. But let's talk about pop culture. Okay, so growing up, one of my earliest memories is watching Star Trek on TV when I was probably 4 years old. I don't remember what the episode was, but that's what I watched. And I remember watching Polka Dot Door, and I remember watching Today's Special, and of course all the cartoons, Thundercats, Voltron, G.I. Joe, Who's the Boss I watched, Growing Pains, all that stuff. Johnny Quest, so many different shows. Dr. Snuggles, do you guys remember Dr. Snuggles? So I was always a big TV kid. Now, in previous episodes, I've talked about Cannon, my stepdad, and his big love were westerns and football. And because I didn't like him because he was not a good person, not a good stepdad, if you will. Naturally, I hated football and westerns because he would come in, take over the TV, and whatever I was watching would just disappear because he didn't care. Therefore, football became synonymous with sports, and I know sports are big into pop culture for most people. That's all people talk about. I don't care about any kind of sport whatsoever. Sometimes I wish I did, because remember in last week's episode I said I used to collect baseball and hockey cards. And when the hockey season comes out, I'll listen on the radio during the news updates who's winning the Stanley Cup playoffs or whatever, or who's in the lead for the World Series of Baseball. But I don't watch it. I just have a vague peripheral knowledge of what's actually happening. So thanks, Canon. I don't watch sports or really care about them all that much. However, westerns I have gotten into a little bit in the last 7 or 8 years. Yeah, 7 or 8 years sounds about right. I picked up The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly with Clint Eastwood, and I really liked that. So what I'm saying is, your tastes in pop culture change over time. They're influenced by your upbringing, by the people around you. Remember last week again, I was in a big competition with my friend Andrew because he was collecting the Star Trek stuff, the action figures, and I had to have more than him. Well, that's part of this. We would talk about different things in the schoolyard, the different Star Trek episodes. I remember he went and saw, and this he must have been what, we were 11, we're a week apart for our birthdays, and he's a week older than I am. And I remember him talking about having gone to see RoboCop in 1987. 11 years old he would have been when that movie came out, and it is super, super violent. But he was talking about it in the schoolyard and explaining it, and I was like, that sounds like the coolest thing ever. And I don't even remember the first time I ever ended up watching RoboCop, but it's one of my favorite films. Andrew and I have a similar taste in different things. One of our favorite TV programs, and I think one of the best TV series of all time actually, happens to be Babylon 5.
This is the story of the last of the Babylon stations. The year is 2258. The name of the place is Babylon 5.
It's about an Earth station in neutral territory in space, and it's kind of a neutral territory for aliens to meet up, do business, have diplomatic relations, and of course it's the humans that bring everybody together. And that's what pop culture does. It brings society together. That used to be the thing when there was only 3 channels. What were they? CBS, ABC, and NBC? And people would talk about what happened on TV last night around the water cooler. I guess if you had an office in the water cooler. I don't think I've ever worked in an office where there was a water cooler, but that was always the cliche. Who shot JR? Luke and Laura's Wedding, the Roots miniseries, all these things that happened in the 70s and 80s, and even the 90s a little bit. And then there was more and more channels, and society kind of got fragmented. I always joke that I blame the internet for wrecking society. Is that true? I don't really know. We know so much more information now because the internet's on our phones, it's in our homes, it's everywhere. Wi-Fi, cable modems, and whatever. I'm not sure of the technology. I'm sure people still have dial-up modems somewhere. They must still exist. I don't really know. But the point is that technology is so advanced. We have access to 24-hour-a-day information. You're not far away from it. It's just always there. It's a pop culture overload. It's a news overload. So what we need to do, I think, is go back to, let's say, 1992, before the internet really took hold in, 94, 95? And we didn't have all that information. We didn't know what was going on all the time, and I think we were better people for it. Maybe that's not true. I don't really know, because it's also a great thing to have all this information, because we can communicate better with people around the world, and we have more information. You can't really hide anything. All that police brutality and racist groups and all this stuff, they can't hide anymore. So that's a good thing. That's more of a social media thing, I guess, not really pop culture. So let's talk about pop culture. Star Trek is back on the air after 12 years. The last Star Trek series was Star Trek Enterprise, and it ended in 2005, and then we had nothing until this past September 2017 when Star Trek Discovery aired. And now there's been 6 episodes, and it's really very divisive. There's the old school Trekkies, and the new school Trekkies and people who have they're very opinionated. Because one of the main things is the look of the Klingons. Back in the 60s, when the Klingons were introduced, they were just kind of dark-skinned guys with beards and kind of vests. And then in the movies and the Next Generation and whatnot, they had the head ridges and the long hair and the beards and the warrior outfits, and they talked about honor all the time. And now in this new series, the Klingons don't look anything like that. They don't have hair. They've got way more ridges. Their face looks all different. And we don't know what's happening yet. Apparently the producers are going to, they've said they're going to explain it in later episodes. And as of today, actually, it was just renewed for a second season, so that's good. Lots of various opinions, and I think it's doing really well. I'm enjoying the heck out of it. I'm also really liking The Orville. That's Seth MacFarlane's new space show, which he said was his take on Star Trek. So that's great. Last year, This Is Us came out, and it's a really, really popular show. It's not sci-fi or anything like that. It's a family drama, different time periods and whatnot. And that's super popular. The Outlander is really popular as well. That's another time travel thing where there's a lady and she splits her time between the 19th century and the 17th century. I've seen a few episodes of that. Of course, The Walking Dead just came back for season 8, and that's always great. It's a show that you either love or you can't stand. I tend to love it overall, even though some of the seasons aren't the best, but generally I really like it. Stranger Things came on Netflix last year, and that was a juggernaut. That was huge. Season 2 is almost here. What else have we got going on? Well, The Punisher is going to be on Netflix on November 17th. That's a TV series, 13 episodes in the Marvel Universe. We've already had a couple seasons of Daredevil, and we had Jessica Jones and Iron Fist and Luke Cage, and they did their team up in Defenders. All very good series. I tend not to like Jessica Jones, but I really liked Iron Fist. But most people didn't like Iron Fist and love Jessica Jones. So that's another thing with pop culture. Everybody has their own opinion. Everybody feels the need to share their opinion. Oh, you're wrong for liking this, or how could you defend that series' creative direction? So there's always something. There's always something going on. How do we let pop culture define who we are as people? Well, we don't have to. Like, there's the whole Star Wars better than Star Trek. And I've gotten into those debates, and I don't really think there's any quantifiable way to actually say what's better. They're different. They're not the same thing. Star Wars and Star Trek aren't even close to being the same. The only thing that they have in common is that they take place in space, and that's pretty much it. But people don't realize that, and they always have to find a fight for something. I don't know why. What does that say about the human race as a species? We're always fighting over things, and we don't have to. We could just all get along, but we don't. Did I tell you guys I picked up a couple records this past week? Maybe it was 2 weeks ago now. I don't remember. I picked up a Neil Young record that just came out in September. I actually got it on vinyl. I haven't listened to it yet because my record player is actually a piece of crap and I need to get a new one. But I picked up the new Neil Young record and I picked up the latest Kesha CD. So there are my various musical tastes. They're very different, very eclectic. I was always made fun of back in my university days for liking all the female singers. That's what my roommates always harassed me. But you know what? I like what I like, and that's my choice. You're allowed to like what you like. You don't have to like what I like. Just looking around my room, I'm realizing that it's actually covered in pop culture stuff. On my bookshelf, I can see a comic version of the classic Star Trek, the original series episode, The City on the Edge of Forever. Above that is a Weird Al book, an Elon Musk biography. I've got a novel that was written by David Duchovny, who played Mulder in the X-Files series. I've got a model of a Star Fury, which is a spaceship from Babylon 5. And laying beside that is Mumra, the evil character from Thundercats. On the opposite side of the room, I've got a whole stack of CDs. I've got a shelf filled with Star Wars Lego, and behind the Lego are several Bishop action figures. And Bishop is the name of my son, and there are various different pop culture Bishops that I have collected over the years. Mostly Bishop from the X-Men, but there's also Bishop the android from the Alien movies. I've got a poster of Michonne from The Walking Dead leading her zombies. And then there's my whole Funko Pop vinyl figure collection. Just looking at what I have, I've got a Voltron, a William Wallace from Braveheart. I've got the Dude from The Big Lebowski, K9 from Doctor Who, K2SO from Star Wars. I've got the Flash. I've got Ren and Stimpy, and a whole bunch more that I can't actually see from where I'm sitting. So maybe it makes me think that I'm actually in the bedroom of a 14-year-old boy instead of a 41-year-old man. What does that say about me? I don't know. I've got a whole shelf filled with comic books that I've been purchasing over the years. So I like pop culture. I guess you could say that defines who I am as a person, although it doesn't define me. Does that make sense? The things we like do not define us, but they give meaning to our lives. At least I hope so. The one thing I have learned from pop culture experiences is that it's not always easy to change what you love. For example, years and years ago, I thought, you know what, I like all this stuff, comic books and sci-fi and whatever. I should try to put some culture into my life. So what did I do? I went on a series of movie watching experiences where I would watch all the Oscar films. I think it was, this must have been 10 years now, and I watched There Will Be Blood and No Country for Old Men and those kind of things, like the really big-time Oscar films and whatever was being lauded for whatever was at the Cannes Film Festival and those things, serious movies. So I tried to like them, and nope, didn't like it. But I thought I should. I should add some culture, get a different perspective, and every time I go out of my way to watch something that normally I wouldn't like, 9 times out of 10, I still don't like it. But there are those times when you accidentally hit upon something and discover it, and it's like, whoa, that is fantastic. 20 odd years ago, I heard about The Shawshank Redemption. I'm like, well, that sounds like a crappy ass movie. But I watched it, and it's one of my favorites now, because you can't judge something by the title. That's what I learned. So, enough about all that. I have an author recommendation for you folks, and it's one of the same things. I had once heard about this book called Tuesdays with Morrie. It was super popular, and everybody was talking about it, and I just steered away from it. But then I came across this book called The 5 People You Meet in Heaven. I'm like, well, that sounds interesting. So I read it, and it was a super fast read. It only took a few hours. And it turned out it was by the same guy who wrote Tuesdays with Morrie. And that author's name is Mitch Albom. I think I've got almost all of his books. He did The Timekeeper's Daughter, I believe it's called. I don't have the books in front of me. They're downstairs on the shelf. But Tuesdays with Morrie, The 5 People You Meet in Heaven, The First Phone Call from Heaven, I think was another one. Anyway, he's got a good half dozen or more, and they're all very fast reads, and I highly recommend checking out Mitch Albom if you're looking for something kind of quirky, but with a deeper meaning. So look that up. All right, so I realized this was a little bit of a rambly episode. I have lots of various thoughts on pop culture and how it affects our life and different things. I think maybe I'll have to get into a more in-depth episode on social media and how that affects our consumption of pop culture, the news, the world around us, and that kind of thing. So that'll come along eventually. But I just wanted to thank you guys for coming along and being here. I've got a new end closing theme. I don't know what you call it. End credits, maybe? Anyway, I got my friend Shane to record a different ending for the podcast. Hope you'll stick around to listen to that. It's always appreciated if you leave a review in Apple Podcasts or the iTunes Store or the Stitcher website or whatever you use to listen to podcasts. If you could leave a review for me and let other people know about it, that would be fantastic. And remember, you don't need to create a masterpiece every day. You need to get some oil on the canvas every day.
This has been another episode of the Soulforge Podcast with Sean Vanderloo. If you'd like to contact the show, email us at soulforgepodcast@gmail.com. We are Soulforge Pod on Twitter. You can follow Sean on Twitter and Instagram at Darth Vaderloo. Please rate and review us in Apple Podcasts or the podcatcher of your choice. To support the show for as little as $1 a month, visit patreon.com/Darth Vaderloo. Thanks for visiting the Forge. We will see you for the next episode.